3, 2, 1.
Here we go!
Hey, you amazing Earthlings. Welcome to the next episode of Shifting the Paradigm. And you know, no matter how many I do, how many times I'm a guest, my heart always beats really fast. I always get nervous that like there's going to be some kind of technical difficulty, which has happened way too many times. So my heart's like beating. But I'm here fresh from moderating the live chat on the Unidentified Celebrity Review channel where Lou Elizondo was interviewed. So many amazing insights. I recommend that if you haven't seen it, go check it out, and I'll put the link in the description box below. So I have a quick announcement coming up on Saturday, the premiere of the first episode of Mysteries with a History. And let's go ahead and play that trailer. So what do you guys think? Looks pretty interesting. So be there tomorrow at 5 EST. Make sure to check it out. And it will feature many aspects of the UFO mystery and a ton of others. And now let me introduce tonight's guest, someone who is literally a YouTube phenomenon with his channel, the Carl and Jinger channel, with over 3 million subscribers. This is a gentleman who has undergone a huge paradigm shift. Many aspects of his life have changed over the recent years. And to discuss that and so much more, please welcome with me, 𝗗𝗶𝗀𝗶𝗺.
Hi, Christina. Wow, what an amazing intro for the new show. Like, I'm so stoked for that. That looks amazing. It's right up my alley. I love everything that I saw in there. And the first episode coming out of the gates is going to be about shadow people. So that's exciting, Christina. That's a really good job on that. That's exciting.
Thank you. I'm definitely looking forward to it. Just talking about it, hearing other people's stories. It's going to be really fantastic.
I've never been referred to as a gentleman either. So thank you for that. That's a first for me. I'll take it.
There you go. All men should be gentlemen. All of them.
Thank you.
So could you please be so kind as to introduce yourself, tell the viewers a little bit about you and your work with your YouTube channels?
Yeah, so back in 2009, when YouTube was actually just fresh, I was living in a small town, trying to raise a family. I was a licensed social worker working at a juvenile correction center. and I was really just kind of depressed and unhappy. I weighed like 400 pounds. I was way overweight and struggling.
What?
Yeah, struggling. I've lost 175 pounds thanks to learning meditation and mindfulness and a bunch of stuff. But I got into YouTube to join a weight loss competition in 2009 to help hold me accountable. And also I was just really tired of the normal routine of society, you know, waking up, going to work, coming home, watching TV, and then going to bed and doing it again like a hamster on a wheel, you know, just stuck in that tail chasing mindset. And when YouTube came out, I decided that like getting a camera and trying to do a video journal. It wasn't even called vlogging back then. It was just like a video diary. It was before SD cards were even invented, technically.
What year was this?
2009. So it was like before they were really commercially available. You had to plug all the hardware in and none of it was compatible. And I just thought if I started doing photography or got a camera and went outside, that it would get us and the whole family out and take us new places. And there was this passion that started inside of me about that. And after the weight loss competition ended, I realized I had about 3,000 followers off of that. And so I just kind of kept that ball going, and now it's over 3 million there. And underneath all of that, I tried the whole time to try and do like Bigfoot research or UFO research or try to do videos related to that. But I kind of built up an audience more based around like teenagers and kids, and that's what really took off. So the main channel really exploded on that kind of trend-based content. But now that that success has been accomplished, I have the time now to be able to start my new stuff on 𝗗𝗃𝗃𝗏 over on my YouTube channel, where like we're going to be talking about a lot of stuff. I've already done interviews with the paranormal couple talking about haunted places and different paranormal events and haunted museum. And this coming Sunday, I have some guests coming on that are actually a Bigfoot research group, him and his brother, that might come on talking about different paranormal things like Skinwalker Ranch, the Sasquatch, and the UFO phenomenon and the paranormal, and how all of those kind of bleed together at some weird level. And so we're going to try and dig into all that. So I'm just launching 𝗗𝗃𝗃𝗏 on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube to try and jump over to this, what has always been burning underneath that I really am excited about, which is all of this stuff.
Oh my gosh. And if anyone that's interested in following him, all the links are in the description box below. And if they're not, because I can't remember if I put them on, they will be after the show when I edit the description. So take a look at that at the end of this. Now I want to ask you, what was your how did you get interested in the UFO mystery? Like, how did it get triggered inside of you?
I kind of grew up with my dad's fascination with it. He was in the military over on the border and between East and West Germany, right at the height of the Cold War after World War II. And for some reason, all growing up, he was way into the old classic movies like The Thing, you know, which depicts like a UFO frozen under the ice, like at the beginning, the old original black and white one, and that whole thing, and kind of like the biological alien growing in a pod and then being brought back to life like a zombie. That was really cool. And The Day the Earth Stood Still, and all of that, those old movies. But my dad was always kind of serious about it. He liked the movies, but he was always like, hey, what if this was real? What if they came down? And what would you do if if Jesus came back for the second coming or Armageddon, but he was in a spaceship, you know? And like he would always ask these weird philosophical questions and stuff when I was really little, and it really sparked my interest. And that was the same with other paranormal things. And I kind of growing up, I was raised a Mormon. I'm not anymore, but growing up in the Mormon church, I also was surrounded with this concept that the spirit world was overlaid with our reality, and that when people died, you were still here in this realm of earth, just in another spirit dimension. And you go to the temple as a Mormon and do what they call work for the dead, where you actually are doing rituals to try and connect you with your ancestors all the way back to the beginning. And that's why the church is so big into doing genealogy work and ancestry work and things like that. It's all kind of like strange historically to me now, all of that involvement, but I grew up with that. Like it was a number one part of my life. And so the spiritual side of things and and the religious aspect of it was always a big part of my life. But that was always underlaid with this fascination with the mysteries of it and kind of questioning it all and trying to find out what's like really going on because of just personal experiences and things that you have that kind of conflict with what you're taught, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And you talked about your dad influencing you, asking all these questions. You know, my dad was the exact same way. And it's amazing how, you know, we live with our parents at a young age, but they're a really big starter that makes us ask these questions, that make us watch these TV shows or movies. And I want to shout out to every single parent that's watching this. Like, you make a huge impact on your kids' likes and dislikes, their interests. And so
yeah, I never felt made fun of or kind of ridiculed or teased about it. I was allowed a lot of times to you know, read and write really creatively and be artistic and stuff, and that really made me feel more secure to explore all of these things and talk about them without worrying about what other people think, if not kind of wearing it as a badge of honor. There was a saying growing up that we are a peculiar people. That's the way I was kind of raised, that it was okay to be peculiar and to stand out. And so I've kind of just always ran with that, and it's worked out great for me so far.
Did you grow up in the dark skies environment in Utah?
No, I actually grew up in Southeast Idaho. I was born in a small town called Rexburg, and then I went to high school in a sugar city, is what it was called, where they had sugar beet farms and stuff. So it was just like open fields and potato farms, and really in the middle of nowhere. But now I'm down in southern Utah, just kind of an hour and a half away from Area 51, and surrounded by all kinds of fascinating ancient mysteries and histories and modern ones too, with Area 51 and Area 52 with Douglas Airway up by the north, and Skinwalker Ranch and the Grand Canyon with Marble Canyon, and everything around in Arizona. There's just a ton of it.
Oh my gosh, so much. It's unbelievable how they're all concentrated in one kind of area. Can you tell me about any experiences you had either with the UFOs or any other unusual phenomenon, if you have any?
Yeah. Well, I've never actually told this story, but I might as well. I'm going to go into it a lot more detail on Sunday on my show when we're talking about Bigfoot. But I actually got invited to go be part of to film behind the scenes for a documentary that was being filmed about a Bigfoot sighting and occurrence that happened in the Sierra Nevada mountains in California. And so I was just supposed to kind of be an extra person on set to get sort of like the YouTube footage behind the scenes. And it was a small group of people. And this does tie into the UFO thing, believe it or not. And I don't have an explanation for it. But we were up there to film a Bigfoot documentary. And we got up there, and on the very first night, we just kind of like went over the talking points, like what are we going to do and what shots do we want to get tomorrow? And we went to the actual location where the sighting had happened like a year earlier on the exact same weekend, thinking that like if these things were migratory, you know, or if they came through the same areas at the same time, we wanted to be there at the anniversary, like an exact year later. And so we got up there to the camp spot and we set up camp. Do you want me to tell the whole story?
Yes, tell the whole story. I'm excited.
Yeah. So we parked our cars and stuff. I just had a rental car, and I can't remember how many of us there were, but we got up there and we did some like goofing around, like tree knocks, you know, where we took some sticks and we were smacking some trees and listening around, and we walked around exactly where the sighting was and talked about it. And it was mostly just kind of like a prep day. Like tomorrow we're going to get up at first light and we're just going to film some footage, you know, not really expecting like we're going to actually go hunt a Bigfoot or anything or see one. We were just kind of up there to film the video. So we're goofing around, and at night, everybody, as it gets late, you know, we start the campfire, and a couple of us get the courage up and are daring each other like, oh, we should walk down the road. It's like a quarter mile to where the event happened from our campsite. And so in the pitch dark, we walked down there and did some tree knocks and some of the, you know, like finding Bigfoot type stuff, you know, and not really knowing what we were doing. And then it got kind of weird because we heard what sounded like somebody with like a really deep voice, like talking up the hillside out of view. It sounded like somebody mumbling to somebody else, and you couldn't make out what they were saying, but it sounded like a really, really low, deep, like a strange conversation going on, like actually in the language up the hill from us to the south. And we didn't really think a whole lot of it. We were just kind of like, can you hear something? And you could kind of hear it. And so we went back to the camp spot. Everybody was really tired from the drive up there, and they all crawled in their tents to go to bed. But before that, this one lady, and this didn't even occur to me till later because it didn't make sense to me at the time. I wasn't doing meditation or any kind of like remote viewing type stuff or out of body type experimentations or anything at the time. I was still a member of the Mormon church then, but this lady named Nadia, she actually had like these little, like one of these sound bowl things like I've got here. And she had some other stuff, and she burned some sage, which I have here as well now. But she did like a little, like a ritual or kind of a meditative thing near the campsite. And she was ringing the bell and putting out this. And I was just kind of like, oh, I don't know what she's doing over there. I didn't think too much of it. And then everybody went to bed. And right at 3 o'clock in the morning, me and the guy who had the sighting were sitting around the campfire. And he was just really kind of heartfelt telling me the story. And right at that moment, this strange, like something started walking up through the trees to the west of us from the direction of where the sighting had occurred and where we were earlier that night. And if you've seen the movies, the Lord of the Rings, in the second one, the Two Towers movie, when Treebeard walks, it sounded like a giant walking, like a walking up. And then it started stomping louder. And then up high in the trees, there was these loud tree snaps, like limbs crack, like being snapped. And you could see the trees shaking and like pine cones falling and pine needles falling down from these trees. And this thing walked up through the forest and stood in the darkness right outside the campfire light. And looking back on it now, it was more like a Skinwalker Ranch type encounter. I didn't necessarily see like the physical body of the thing, but there was just this presence of this like shadow and like a silhouette of a shoulders and a head that just looked like 9 feet tall, this huge thing in the trees. And we jumped up and turned around, and I had my flashlight in my hand, and I didn't have it turned on. And all through my mind really quick, I was thinking, man, if I turn this flashlight on, I'm either going to scare it away and not get it on camera. I was like, I want to be the guy that films this thing. I want to film it. So I was getting ready to turn my light on, but then I was also thinking, what if this thing gets angry and like charges at us when I turn the light on or attacks us or something? I was genuinely scared at that moment. And right then, up to the hill to the left of us, we heard something else like run through the trees, like footsteps, like it's like there was 2 of them. And at that moment, I was like, okay, I got to get my camera or somebody's camera. And the film producer's tent was about 10 feet away to my right. And my camera was charging on the charger in the car right in front of where this thing was standing in the trees. So I didn't want to walk towards it to get my camera. So I went over to his tent. I started like creeping over. Meanwhile, this other guy was like, turn on your light, turn on your effing light. And he was like yelling at me. He was scared. And so as soon as I got to the zipper and started opening the tent, whatever it was turned and just ran through the trees. And so we reached in the tent, woke up the producer of the documentary, grabbed his camera, which had a big bank of LED lights on the top of it. And I grabbed the camera out of his hands, and me and this other guy ran down the road and tried to chase this thing, trying to film it in the dark. And it just outran us back into the thick part of the trees. And then everybody woke up. The whole thing settled down. I mean, we ran down the road, and then I realized if there was 2 of them, maybe the other one was moving in behind us, and we decided it was a bad idea to keep going. So we went back to camp and woke everybody up. And that same night, before the sun came up, a couple of people got scared and actually left and drove off the mountain, didn't want to stay. And the rest of us that were there was 3 of us that went, and we decided to walk down the road again and look around if we could see anything. And this is the part we all agreed that we'd never tell anybody, but here I am years later and decide I'm going to tell it. So we walked down the road part way, and we were standing there talking, and then all of a sudden, from the same way that this thing had ran off, and I'm not making this up, this ball of light, like an orb of light, it like hovered over the top of the trees in front of us, just to the north of us. It was super bright. It wasn't blinking on and off. It didn't have any colors. It was just a white, like, orb of light. And it just sort of hovered and moved like this through the sky and hovered from the west to the east, and then just went off into the distance, just kind of wiggling and moving really slow through the sky, like you would expect a helicopter to fly really low above the trees. But there was no sound. There was no propeller. There was no chopper noise, no airplane sounds at all. It was just like a glowing orb of light that hovered over. And we just stood there and watched this thing go over us. And then we looked at each other, and the producer just looked at us, and he said, "We cannot ever tell anybody that we just saw a UFO or whatever the hell that was, because nobody will even believe the Bigfoot part, because this is getting out of control." And that was pretty much it. And the next morning we found footprints that were left, right, bipedal footprints that literally circled around our camp where we were. And actually the footprints and the trail of them came all the way up right behind where I had been sitting, about 10 feet behind me. I had no idea anything was there or had walked up. Like this thing had stalked us before it decided to jump up and scare us or come up on us, or if there was 2 of them. But it was a pretty wild experience. And I'm not going to lie, when the sun came up and it finally felt safe and we found the footprints, I had taken plaster of Paris up there and poured the plaster cast, and so we got a couple of the footprints like actually poured. I did a terrible job of it, but I got one it was my first time, but I got one good casting that I think ended up even being seen by Jeff Meldrum and a few other people, the Bigfoot investigator. It got taken. I haven't seen it since the trip. It got kind of taken by the crew, but I went the next morning after that, when the sun came up, I just kind of walked off alone and sat in the trees, and the reality of that whole experience kind of sunk in. I was like, these things are real? Like, what the hell happened? And what did we see? And it was so overwhelming. I literally broke down and started crying. I just sat there and sobbed. And I was looking around, like, it was like, I don't know, like if you saw like a dragon or like a unicorn or something that's not supposed to exist, and there it was, and I thought it might kill me, and seeing all this whole experience, and it really rattled my reality in a big way. Like
shifted your paradigm completely.
It shifted my paradigm completely. Yeah. And it didn't occur to me till later that all the goofing around that we were doing may not have had as big of an impact on the experience as Nadia doing her little meditation ritual or something may have had something to do with that. And that's kind of been the case since then, as since I've gotten into this and explored that seems to be more connected than tree knocking and other things like that. But that's kind of the first big encounter. And since then, my wife and I have been over by Area 51 and done like sound frequency things where we have a portable speaker and we play these sound tones. And then we do a meditation that's like I don't like to reference Stephen Greer or whatever, because he's kind of the first one to publicly have a big audience to talk about it. But it's sort of like a reverse remote viewing method where you sort of Google Earth your own location, like reach your consciousness out into other dimensions of space and show everything right where you're at, and invite them to come appear to you if they're friendly or if they want to come. And we've had, which is, I don't necessarily recommend everybody do that if you're not really familiar with it.
Yeah.
But we've had, the same kind of weird orb that we saw up on the mountain has
Well,
like
Carl,
hovered over top of us after doing that. Yeah.
I wanna ask you a question on that, but hold on. I want to say thank you to John so much. He says, "Keep up the great work, Christina. Let's all hope disclosure actually happens as we are hoping." Thank you so much. And your story, Carl, is so cool. I have like so many questions in my head I want to ask, but
Awesome.
one of them being is, do you think there is a link between the sightings of orbs of light, UFOs, and Bigfoot? Because there are quite a few stories of people seeing Bigfoot and lights in the sky or UFOs kind of in the same vicinity. So do you think there's a link, and what's your opinion on that?
The common denominator, in my opinion, is the human conscious perception and our ability to perceive reality. I think that the link is actually us and what we're capable of seeing and hearing and perceiving. And I've said this on other shows before, because I think it's really relevant. And John Keel talks about this a lot in his book, The Eighth Tower on Ultra-Terrestrials and the Super Spectrum is like a really cool book that helped answer a lot of my questions, but it makes sense of what I've experienced. But I think that the problem is that we're sort of, as in our physical bodies, we're sort of constrained off the get-go to only being able to perceive the colors of the rainbow and be able to hear certain frequencies. And once you get into like the infrared spectrum on the low end, you have to use tools in order, or devices like FLIR and things like that, in order to see into the infrared. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have the ultraviolet spectrum and beyond that, which you can't see as a human being.
Right.
But I think human consciousness, when you start to learn like meditation or altered states of consciousness, you can sort of transcend those barriers a little bit and be able to either perceive things that you normally wouldn't be able to perceive that are actually there all the time. So if you imagine our reality as we have our 3D world that we exist in, that we walk around in, but if there was overlaid with this sort of super spectrum, well, that's just outside the infrared and outside the ultraviolet, and there are entities or beings that exist there, we might consider that a spirit realm or a paranormal realm or another dimensional realm. And there could be multiples of those all overlaid in the same spot. And so, and it could have to do with space-time as well, like things that have occurred in the past sort of repeating on a loop in the same location,
Right.
are
And
still occurring.
Elizondo talked about that, and I know you were there watching it on his interview today. He definitely touched base on that completely. But do you kind of, well, two things. One, IceHawk had a question before I ask my question. We'll ask his. It says, were you ever able to get any footage of the orbs?
I filmed footage of the one at Area 51 that my wife and I did, but we didn't film the orb up on the mountains during the Bigfoot encounter. And there is a lot of footage of us running around in the dark with cameras, acting terrified and swearing a lot, trying to chase after the Sasquatch encounter. But we didn't get anything on footage. It was just too fast. You know, by the time I even made a move for the camera and got the thing turned on, it was already a good 100 yards away, running fast away from us through the trees. So we actually didn't get anything on camera except for the footprints and that kind of stuff after it all occurred. But on my cell phone, I have filmed the one orb that flew over near Area 51. And again, I'm skeptical about all of it and wonder exactly what happened, if I was mistaken about it. I'm pretty honest about that. And even when you're around Area 51, you have to wonder what drones they have or different devices that you think are, could be interdimensional or extraterrestrial craft or something like that. When you're near a military testing airbase, you have to wonder if it's actually just them flying something out to see what the heck you're doing, but it could have just been people.
And it's healthy to be a skeptic. I mean, I wouldn't say like, a debunker like some people, but I think it's healthy to ask questions and really trying to find answers instead of just kind of like blindly believing things.
Right.
Because I want to go, because you had talked about in your Bigfoot story that you did plaster, right? So how did the plaster of Paris footprints turn out, and were they clear? Because you didn't see them, right? You never got them back. So like, was it like a good print that you captured?
Yeah, I got the one print that turned out really good, and it was hot up there, and we didn't have like a hose full of water or like 20 gallons of water to mix an entire bag of plaster. So it was kind of like thick. It was more like, usually you want it really runny and thin when you pour it in so you can get all the details. We did get the first one, but then it sort of started evaporating the water off, and we didn't have enough up there if we wanted to stay and keep camping to just pour it all in the plaster bucket. So the other two turned out not so good that and I was the only one that brought a bag of plaster, like we might see something. And I was just some backup guy, but we did get the one.
Smart one.
And it was pretty cool. You could see 5 toes. You could totally see the curvature of the foot. It ended up being, it was like over 14 inches long, and I can't, like 5 or 6 inches wide. So it was large and barefoot. And now there are like black bears and stuff up there in the Sierra Nevada mountains, but they don't really get that big, and they're definitely quiet. You know, they don't stomp up on you and try to scare you or anything like that. They're usually stealth hunters, and and they move around very quietly, and they don't get that big. So unless it was some gigantic abnormal black bear track, it definitely wasn't double stepping in its own tracks. It was a left right everywhere we followed it, just like something walking on 2 legs. And the other thing is I've thought about it a lot, that if it was another person that they had sneak up there to try and scare us for the documentary, they had no idea if I was packing a gun or anything like that. If I would have pulled out a pistol, or the other guy did, instead of my flashlight, like, they risked somebody in some costume of getting shot potentially, and it was no joke. Everybody was legitimately scared up there as to what was going on. Most of the people left, and there was only like a small few of us that stayed out there, because it was scary the second night to try and sleep out by the campfire and just try to go to bed. It's like, what if these things come back and grab you, and even if you got in your car, it's like it has a hand and it can just like open the door. When all that sinks in, it was kind of scary.
I bet. Oh my gosh. I mean, I love all the depth that you add into your story, because you can just visualize it. Mav, thank you so much. Thank you. She says, Mysteries with the History looks amazing. Big love for all you're doing. Both you're doing. Sorry.
Thank you. $20. That's awesome.
Yes. Oh, and our friend John is here. Hey, everyone. Hey, John. Thank you for coming by. Don't forget to stop by tomorrow for Mysteries with the History. It's going to be super duper cool.
It's going to be awesome.
It will be. I'm ready. In your opinion, these kinds of creatures around the world, like the Yeti, Bigfoot, Sasquatch, and Yowie, is that how you say it?
The Yowie.
Thank you, the Yowie. Do you think these are indigenous to Earth?
Boy, that's a good question. I think that's unknown to me. I think if they're indigenous in a way that's different than just straight up physical. And I used to not believe this. I used to think, you don't assume, like, if a deer ran up over the hill and you ran up to look at it, if all of a sudden it wasn't there, you would assume that it just like hid itself really well, or was able to run quick enough that you couldn't see it. You wouldn't just jump to this far out conclusion that it's opening portals and jumping through into other dimensions and things. But if you kind of let go of it being just a straight up physical dimensional being, but more of like in Skinwalker Ranch, sort of like a poltergeist or apparition, or even like what they would call the Mothman, like in the Mothman experiences, or
Carl, but before you go on, some people might not know the Mothman story. Can you just like briefly summarize it for those that might be interested?
So the Mothman was an entire experience that where this flying and creature, almost like a winged creature, like a winged Sasquatch, like a hairy thing with large glowing eyes and wings, terrorized an entire community and was seen by dozens of people. And it actually was John Keel, the book that I referenced. He's the one that brought that whole story to the forefront. And the whole movie, the Mothman Prophecy with Richard Gere, is like based off of him and his investigation of that whole case. And it spurred him to investigate tons of locations like the Bridgewater Triangle, and he traveled all over the world and had multiple paranormal encounters and UFO encounters. And a lot of people, saw the Mothman appearing like a giant bat creature that was hanging on this bridge right before it collapsed with a bunch of people on it in the hometown where all that happened. I can't remember if it was it in Virginia or...
Yeah, it was West Virginia.
Virginia, where that occurred. But similar incidents like that, like from Skinwalker Ranch to the Mothman to these Bigfoot things, kind of make you stretch your understanding of it to think that this is more of like a paranormal sort of or an interdimensional encounter. And maybe our expectations of just seeing, trying to make sense of what we just encountered or what we just saw, you kind of like a Rorschach ink blot, your subconscious sort of fills in the gaps for something that you just can't fathom. And so we're up there filming a Bigfoot documentary. So it was Bigfoot, but looking back on it now, I don't know what it was. It was just like the silhouette of this dark, terrifying thing that came up through the trees and scared us and took off. And then we saw this orb flying over. So I think it kind of defies description and understanding, but there's a lot of people trying to figure it out right now.
Oh yeah, and having these kinds of experiences, having these kinds of questions opens the doors for us. And I really want to give a shout out to Creepy Little Book, my friend Pete. And if you haven't checked out his channel, you are missing out, guys. Every show he does is so informative and so much variety and good information. So go check out his channel today at the Creepy Little Book. He's awesome.
It's fun. His chats are fun. The way he jokes. Oh yeah, I was just there the other night hanging out in the chat.
He's so interactive, and he's a big inspiration to me. He really is.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Oh yeah. So I want to address, here it is. So Zofa says, I've heard recordings of the Bigfoot speaking to each other in a Chinese-like language from the 70s, and a former Russian mod calls them otherworld. Have you heard of that footage?
Yeah, the samurai talk, that was filmed or recorded supposedly up in the Sierra Nevada mountains, right where we were in the same spot. So up just north of Sierraville in Northern California, there was some backwoods folks that had a little hunting camp that they would frequent up there, and they had an audio recorder that they took up there and recorded all this it sounds like ancient samurais talking or chattering in a Asian language, and even the guy that had the Bigfoot encounter that caused the whole documentary to be filmed said that when he saw these things, there was an adult and two little ones, two juvenile ones, and that they were talking to each other in some weird gibberish that he couldn't understand. And they even came up to him at one point and were and trying to talk to him like they had some kind of a language. And you get all these weird accounts and reports of them also mimicking and doing mimic noises. So you might even hear what sounds like a baby crying out in the woods, or kind of weird sort of poltergeist type things that either scare you or cause you to go investigate, and they sort of mess with you if that's the case. That might not just be straightforward like a giant wood ape. It could be something that mimics like a wolf, or could mimic an ape, or mimic different sorts of shapes, because they might not be just a straight up dimensional physical being like we assume they are.
And going back to the dimensions, I really want to hit on a thing that Lou Elizondo said in his interview today on the Luis Jimenez show. And he said that just recently, scientists are finding that electrons don't just go around the nucleus, right? But instead, at 100 trillion times per second, it's jumping in and out, right? And which is quantum entanglement. Do you think that these kinds of paranormal beings, Bigfoot or anything of that kind of nature, can somehow tap into that and maybe be able to jump from this dimension to another?
I think it's possible. I think that it's also a thing that even in quantum science and in that sub quantum level, the Hadron Collider and things like that, they realize that these particles and photons and electrons and things like that, when they burst them apart to study them, that they create a superposition, meaning that a doppelganger of its own particle literally will shoot off into somewhere in another dimension or into outer space, almost like a reflective, polarized, balancing opposite to the original. Almost like at the subquantum level, energy, when it's split apart, will divide itself and create like a fractal or a mirror image of itself. And so it makes you wonder if our own consciousness or our own sense of self has some sort of out there other dimensional perspective that's reflecting on these other dimensions of reality. And so when you get into these states of perception or states of mind to perceive these things, you can sort of access that. I'm sort of talking about like remote viewing and the out of body perceptions when you get into this type of mystical experimentation with the phenomenon. But I do think that like if these beings if they're real and they exist on some sort of an alternate dimensional reality, and they have the ability to move in and out of that at will, it may just be as simple as them interfacing with our own inner workings and our own setup and how we're set to perceive reality. And if they can sort of bleed into that telepathically, then they could appear like a shapeshifter or appear like something that they may not be in an illusionary way, like a mirage or sort of a hallucination type of event where you might not really be sure if you really encountered something or not, because it's interfacing with your own subconscious perceptions in order to appear or in order to step into our dimensional reality. It might not be as physical as we think. It could have to do with how they're tapping into our own hardware as a human being in order to manifest, if that makes sense.
Kind of, but let's move to UFOs. Can you give me your thoughts on the way that disclosure or the push for disclosure is going?
Oh, I think it's awesome. I think that what's happening now, like that it's flooded all over the media and forced into people's faces, the implications of it all are so vast. I think just on the forefront, talking about what are these things? Are they drones? Are they foreign adversaries' drones and technology? Even at that level, it's a huge, fascinating question with a lot of implications, because if there's technology like this that is anti-gravitational or can fly almost near speed of light speeds, like going around the circumference of the earth in 7 seconds or things like that, or moving at these unnatural speeds and transmedium in and out of the ocean and into space, then as a public, we deserve to know that. So even at a scientific physical reality level, if they're not extraterrestrials, if they're just from Lockheed Martin, we still deserve to know, because this is we're still driving around in gasoline engines and cars and polluting the environment, and people get in an accident and have to wait for half an hour for Life Flight to come pick them up. And I think that it would solve a lot of problems to have this technology be public. It doesn't need to just be a weaponized secret. But if it is something else, if it is either extra dimensional beings or things that have been around us and been able to hide from us this whole time and have existed right alongside of us, like Bob Bigelow says, right under our noses, if that's the case, then I think it's time to lift the veil and part the fog and to start to understand what we're living with. It's like if you were like a chicken in the chicken coop, suddenly becoming aware that what you think is your caretakers are coming and taking your eggs and stuff, and they're actually keeping you sort of harnessed in a controlled environment. I think it's time to transcend that as a species, as human beings, and to understand our place in the universe and the true nature of reality, and how these extra-dimensional or extraterrestrial beings might be interacting with us and affecting our reality.
𝗔𝗧𝗧𝗘𝗡𝗧𝗏 has a question. He says, is Carl's tattoos Norse?
They are. They're all Viking. My ancestors were all famous Vikings and conquerors and things like that. And me and my dad went and got this tattoo together on my shoulder. If you can see this one, that's
Wow.
Thor's hammer. And then I went on a trip to Norway and went to the Viking Ship Museum and around other famous locations. And I took pictures of all the actual artifacts and then had the tattoo artists translate that into the big bands and stripes and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a lot of the old mystic Viking symbols and patterns. Yeah.
Very cool. I love it. I mean, tattoos are cool, but like just having your culture attached to it, I think adds like a whole different spectrum of awesomeness. So we've talked about consciousness and physics in regards to UFOs and maybe the Bigfoot cases. If this phenomenon really does encompass something to do with other dimensions and realities, how do you think people would accept that kind of truth?
It depends on the person. I think if people are kind of conditioned in their own belief systems and their own concepts of reality, then they just go, "Oh, that's too much for me." And they just don't even want to know. They would rather just get up and have their life go on the way that it is and go to work and have their paycheck and watch their Netflix. And they like to kind of stay in that box. But I think there's a lot of other people that are really seeking for answers, or they've had experiences that cause them to question the actual nature of reality. And even anybody who's interested in the scientific aspect of it, you have to face the true nature of reality, and you realize that, you know, we are limited to a tiny little fragment of perceptual reality with these basic colors of the rainbow, and the elements in nature that we perceive are just a few on a periodic table of elements. And all of the sounds that we hear can be accounted for just on the main keys of the piano or 6 strings of a guitar. And you have these basic tiny things that account for our whole perception of reality. And we know scientifically that the infinite universe goes vastly beyond that. So there could definitely be more dimensions to reality. And when you get into meditation, or you start to practice things like lucid dreaming or out of body type meditative experiences or remote viewing, you have these experiences that force you to question your perceptions of reality and realize that these other dimensions are possibly there, and that there are things and entities that exist in those other dimensions. So I think that exploring all that in a deep way, really we're talking about what happens, you know, what are we facing when you die? If you don't have a physical body and your body dies and you realize that your consciousness and emotions and perceptions still persist, what is that reality going to be like? How are you going to move and walk around or communicate without the physical meat body that we have, if you're just sort of an entity of consciousness yourself? And to me, that begs the question of like being mindful in your own sense of self and understanding your own sense of consciousness and who you are and where you're at in this reality, regardless of it being physical or in an afterlife or something like that. Which, again, the death of my father and him struggling with dementia and things as he passed away caused me to face a lot of these questions, to realize his reality was really bled over into this other reality years before he physically passed away. And the fear of that, like being trapped in my body and not knowing what to do, or dying and not knowing where I am if I still exist after, sort of plunged me down this journey to try and get answers to this. And that always led me back to the ancient systems of meditation and understanding the waveform vibrational universe that we exist in.
So do you think that what we're seeing occur on Skinwalker Ranch is some kind of like unification of many mysteries, many phenomena that may in itself end up as a form of disclosure, like unified field of mysterious phenomena?
Yeah, I think it could be a lot of different things. I mean, it could be, if you want to be critical about it, it could just be a place where a lot of government experimentations occurred because of the geology of the location, or because they were burying stuff there or something strange like that. It could be something to do with the geology. It seems that these dried up lake beds, these big salt flats, or these crystal form places where there's a region full of quartz crystal in the earth and different types of minerals and exotic minerals in the earth, under certain tectonic pressures can create all sorts of electromagnetic effects. You know, if you crush a crystal under press, it'll actually glow or emit like little sparks of lightning and give off energy in and of itself. And you wonder if maybe the region or the area, like at Skinwalker Ranch, sort of acts like a dish or a receiver that makes our perceptions of reality thinner, so that these other dimensional beings can be perceived, or that they can jump through in and out. And maybe if you want to get paranormal with it, it could have to do with the just horrific things that occurred over there. And if the soul does live on after death, people could get stuck in those negative environments, or an entity, or if you want to call them a ghost, could get kind of hung up in a certain routine that's overlapping with our physical reality that we just don't quite understand yet. But I think that Skinwalker Ranch, if I had to guess, it represents sort of like a hot spot that has all of those elements. It has the primitive people, the indigenous people there with a really difficult history and a dark past, even with curses and things like that involved. You've got a lot of mystic and meditation rituals going on there that can possibly account for the phenomenon to be attracted to that location. But even the geology and the way that the area sits could promote the phenomenon to be able to function easier, have more energy in that region through the geology of the location in order to manifest. And so it could be a whole combination of that. And it seems to be the case that you not only see like weird lights in the sky, type of UFO craft that appear that seem to come through and then leave, but also a lot of talk about portals, orbs, and then things crawling out like and standing up and walking off like a skinwalker that seems to sometimes appear and be perceived like a Sasquatch or a Bigfoot, or and sometimes like a giant dog, or also a whole host of paranormal things. Brandon Fugel's even said that a lot of the activity there seems to be almost like a poltergeist in a certain way. So I think giving it specific names and then just deciding, wow, it's a poltergeist and we know what that is, or it's a Bigfoot, so it's a giant ape, I think is kind of dumbing down the topic from what it actually could be, a little bit more complicated than that.
Wow.
I'm giving really big answers here.
No,
I hope it's not too overwhelming.
No.
I'm just going off.
No, I'm enjoying it. The chat's enjoying it. You're giving really in-depth, fantastic information. I just want to take a moment to encourage the viewers, if you want to see this show on more than one day a week and see me doing research at night in the field as well as new content, please do consider supporting me on Patreon, guys. I have so many things I want to do with this channel, but being in college, you can imagine how tough things are. And so your Patreon support will really, really go a long way. See my Beacons page, link in the information window below, if you want to check out all the perks and benefits that you can get as a supporter. And let me tell you, there are some really, really cool ones, like those graphics that you see that I do on my channel. I can make them for you like that real fast, and trust me, a lot cheaper than what these people would charge you for. Okay, so Carl, would you spend a night alone camping on the Skinwalker Ranch?
Oh yeah, I definitely I would go right into the what is it, Homestead 2, the really creepy one.
Ooh, yes.
Yeah, where they claim that it's a kind of a dark energy place. I would definitely go in there. I think the radiation stuff kind of weirds me out. You know, if it's geologically like microwaves, I don't want to go sit in a geological microwave and cook myself or anything weird like that, which there is that radiation stuff that seems to occur. And the UFO sightings seem to be above the ultraviolet spectrum in these encounters. And you get these, burn victims, people that get radiation burns. Do
you think there's a base nearby where they're seeing so many UFOs, UAPs?
It could be underground. I mean, it could be something like that. I think, but in the end, radiation, we're just talking about waveform vibrational energy that moves in a spooky way. And even your own body gives off electromagnetic type of radiation. You have like like, you don't want to call it an aura, but you have an energy field like around you that they can detect, and your body gives off heat. If you go up and touch things, you're radiating a radiation of heat, and we absorb heat from the sun and radiation. The whole world is different types of frequencies and waveform. Even the visual spectrum of the colors that we all see and perceive is waveform radiation that's just moving at a safe level that our eyes and brain and our hardware is able to perceive as the three-dimensional physical world. And so that when that radiation gets forced into unnatural ways, like they do for nuclear plants and nuclear energy sources and things like that, they're creating anomalous radiation that's not normally natural. But that doesn't mean that it can't occur in geology, or that it can't just, certain places could be prone to being a hot spot for higher electromagnetic waves or microwaves that go into this spectrum that becomes harmful to us. And so that would be the part of it that kind of makes me nervous, is just the electromagnetic waves spiking and getting like cooked or radiation blasted. But as far as like the paranormal side of it, or encountering a UFO or a skinwalker or poltergeist type thing, I think I've done like enough work on the mystical meditative side and understand my consciousness that I don't think, even if I fell into some catatonic hallucinatory experience or something really terrifying, I feel like I could have a kind of a grip on that, to where I would be more intrigued, and it would be sort of worth it to me to experience and to get some answers and to have more cool stories to come back and
cool
share.
Stories. Yes.
Yeah. So I would totally go sit there, and I have a lot of theories about that. What I would do if I was on Skinwalker Ranch, based on the petroglyphs, based on the history, and based on the phenomenon that seems to be occurring there, would totally promote a specific approach to the phenomenon, and how I would try to make contact with it in a friendly way, in a traditional way, in a very ancient way.
That's kind of what I want to ask. And it's like, so what are your thoughts about the actual legends of skinwalkers, like the shapeshifters? You know, these things have a long history in the many First Nation tribes. So what do you think is going on with that?
Yeah, they have the same stuff, you know. In the Asian cultures, it's dragons, and with the indigenous Native Americans, it's the thunderbird. And you wonder, they're just depicted as these firebirds or these giant flying things. And you also have the Mothman that sounds similar to that. But then down on the ground, you have the same symbology throughout the world of this depictions of the Big Dipper, and like the North Star and the horizon, and certain things that indicate, you know, this is kind of a side tangent, but is relevant to it. I think that the ancient people looked to the stars and they tried to understand their physical and spiritual reality, and looking to the heavens or the sky. And you have Polaris, you have the North Star, and then the Big Dipper, Ursa Major, just basically swirls around and around the North Star in a pivot, like an axis point. I'm all blurry now. I better get my camera to focus. I'm moving my hands around. But it all throughout, whether you're in the Asian cultures or the indigenous Native American cultures, they have the wheel of time, or the chariot of time, or the Kala chakra. Let me try and get my camera to focus still over here. But you have this ancient mythology. There, I did it. That has to revolve around basically altered perceptions of space-time by doing particular rituals or mystic things that involve putting a stone circle around you and doing certain things in a certain way that go with the movement of the stars and the Big Dipper around the Polaris, and doing it at the right time of day in a particular way, supposedly has to do with being able to step into alternate dimensions. One of the rituals is called the Pace of You, and there is an Asian mystic who believed that when you did this certain North Star Big Dipper type ritual, that you could actually step in a certain pathway that could step you into an alternate dimension. and he could go invisible or step into these other dimensions or bring other beings through, or also they claim they could contact these other beings and entities and things. And you see this Big Dipper symbology all over, and these ancient stone circles and carvings and rituals that are everywhere. It doesn't matter if you go down into the ancient Mayan and Aztec ruins or in Egypt and you go into the inner chambers of their temples, you get this same sacred geometry that revolves around the seed of life, the flower of life, and then all the way out into the big, like the Mayan calendar or Metatron's cube, which is what I've got on my necklace thing here. These sacred geometric symbols that all have to do with the rotation of our solar system and our planet and the universe, and then kind of stepping outside of that normal flow in order to perceive the other dimensions. So I think the ancient culture being steeped there and the things that the people went through and all the rituals that they did as their spiritual practice, I think you see that on the petroglyphs on the rocks there. They kind of missed all that on the show. But it's just, and even with dream catchers, where you have this web going through the ring, all is indicative of the same teachings that have gone back forever ago.
Well, I want to let everyone know that we're going to be finishing this live stream pretty soon. So if you guys have any questions to ask Carl, please do it in the live chat right now. So my final question is for my final question for this segment, because obviously we're going to be doing a separate Q&A for all the Patreon supporters. So if you are a Patreon supporter, do be expecting more Q&A, because this conversation is going places. It's so interesting, guys. So from your research and studies into consciousness, where do you think human evolution is going? Towards a more expanded consciousness and mental abilities, or more towards integrating technology so we become, in essence, cyborgs? Where do you see humanity in 100 years?
Yeah, I think that you nailed it right on the head. I think it's inevitable that as people upgrade their iPhones and people upgrade their entertainment and they upgrade their whether they are into the mystical side of reality or into meditation or consciousness and things like that, eventually those things are going to become less and less physical, and they're going to either become like Neuralink, where they're biologically integrated into the body. I think people are going to have a problem initially with just installing hardware and software systems into their body. But when they can sort of put it in you with CRISPR or something like that, or they could use a bioidentical method in order to basically enhance your already preset biological abilities using your own DNA and your own genes. They take them out, modify them, and then put them back in order to be able to access the internet with your own biology without having to put some kind of a metal implant or wiring in you. If they could grow it out of your own DNA and then install it. But in the end, we're going to go from using our thumbs to conscious control. So you're going to change the channels on the show that you're watching, or who you want to message or call based on your subconscious control of your inner dialogue and emotions. And there are already probably have that technology in the Air Force and in, where your Neuralink showed just like a couple of months ago that chimpanzee playing a video game using its thoughts, and they're talking about being ready. Elon Musk's talking about being ready for human trials. And so just like you would reach over and use your mouse to move the mouse pointer around on your screen, it might go more into our ability to focus your subconscious and to clear your mind. And if you don't have control over that, the younger generation coming up, being born into that type of technology and world, is going to be sort of forced to go back to these ancient ways, these ancient methods of meditating, clearing your mind, and being able to think of a single intentful thought, being in the now and controlling your emotions, so that you don't just start opening a whole bunch of web pages and augmenting your reality and losing control of your sense of reality as all of that becomes integrated. So I think the technology and the advancements 100 years from now are going to come full circle and force people to face their own inner mindfulness and subconscious as we transcend everything being separate from ourselves and physical technology.
So Zofa has the last question of this live cast, and he says, does Carl think we may have been more involved with Bigfoot in the past? A main character in the Epic of Gilgamesh is a hairy wildman.
Yeah, I mean, the depictions all over, even in the petroglyphs that go back to like 3000 BC, a lot of them look like either strange insect people or ant people, and a lot of them look like weird, like apparition type, like Bigfoot characters, drawn on the walls, and these spooky figures. If you're kind of looking for Bigfoot in the ancient drawings and the writings and in the stories, you're going to hear it. And if you're looking for extraterrestrials or ancient aliens, you're going to find it, because there is a phenomenon, I think, that's been present in the involvement of our human history and might even account for us being here in a certain strange way.
Rather Be Squidding, thank you for even stopping by. He was real busy on the other show. That is it for this episode. I want to thank Carl so much for generously giving time to being a part of this show. And Carl, if you could please be so kind as to tell everyone where they can find you on social media.
Yeah, I think Cristina said she's going to put the link tree down in the description below. So make sure after this is over to refresh the page and look for that, and you can click the link. But if you just search on YouTube or Instagram or Twitter for Carl Vibe, I just started a TikTok as well, you're going to find me on Carl Vibe. That's all the new stuff that I'm doing. And and from there, you'll be able to go and find all the other links. And like I said, this Sunday, we're going to be having a show. So check on my Instagram and everything, where we're going to dig totally into this topic again with other Bigfoot researchers that have actually investigated UFO crash sites in northern Nevada, and have a theory about desert-based like Sasquatch type entities and encounters, and that they've filmed their footprints with FLIR cameras, the heat tracks that look like barefoot footprints, large humanoid type tracks in the desert even. And so we're going to try and break the barriers of our understanding and have a paradigm shift over on Carl Vibe this Sunday. And I've got a ton of cool guests, from professional remote viewers to meditators and spiritualists, and the whole UFO crowd is going to be coming over there. So it's going to be fun.
Thank you so much again, Carl. I really deeply appreciate it. And April, thank you so much.
Yeah, all the chat comments were awesome. I've been reading them over here the whole time. I wish we could have got to a whole bunch of those, but it really helps. It's really
also
fun.
Like so hard to like read and listen at the same time. So I want to give you my full attention and like kind of reading. And so if for some questions that I might have skipped, I am really sorry. It is, again, kind of hard to do all of them together. That's why super chats really stand out, because I can see the color and I'm like, oh, okay. But that is it for Shifting the Paradigm today. I want to say thank you yet again to our guest, Carl Vibe, and thank you for all of you amazing Earthlings for being a part of this conversation. Don't forget, there will also be an extras for all of my Patreon supporters. So if you are a Patreon supporter, stay tuned for that, because that's going to be pretty interesting. And do not forget, I want to see all of you guys tomorrow for Mysteries with a History. I'm talking about shadow people. All right, that is it for Shifting the Paradigm. And I know I already said that, but I'm going to say it one more time. Make sure to be safe, get some good sleep, and have just one spoon of ice cream.